Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Sports Curious podcast presented by Last Night's Game. This week's episode is going to pay homage to our fantastic athletes who went above and beyond and served our country as members of the armed forces. That's right, we're recognizing athletes who are also veterans today. And joining me to talk about this is my wonderful and amazing co host, co founder, and happens to be my epic brother. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on this episode. This is one of my favorite ones to do as we highlight some of these brave and distinguished gentlemen who took time to serve our country and were professional athletes and pretty much the epitome of an idol, someone that you would look up to with their bravery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I kind of want to start this with a little bit of a personal touch because we both have a hero in our minds. Our uncle, who played for the Naval Academy. I think his graduation year was about 1963-ish, if I remember correctly, from when we went to his reunion. But played in the Naval Academy, has all these great stories. Played with 2 Heisman Trophy winners. Also served our country in the Navy. And so he's really our inspiration for this podcast, because it's what an incredible feat, and we understand and have seen firsthand the sacrifices that he and his family made for our country. So thanks to Uncle Vern and Gail and their family. We love you.
Yeah, Uncle Vern played offensive line in front of some incredible people. He was a kicker and he flew helicopters and rescued downed pilots in Vietnam. So
Yeah,
pretty incredible.
yeah. But he also made us do our math homework every time we came to visit. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe that was
Yes,
just me. He made you
that
kick
might
field goals.
probably why I'm not very good at math.
It's probably true too. He was a math teacher later in his career. I still
Yes.
remember, and you probably do too. At one point, they live on a hill, and he was riding his bike up the hill, and he was making us do I don't know what you call that in sports, where it's like the person in the front, the back of the line has to run all the way to the front, and you sort of filter. Do you remember doing that?
Yes.
Yeah. So
It made a
it's
lasting impact.
we may not be good at math or running sprints uphill, but we made a podcast inspired by him. So there you go.
Absolutely.
Well, what's really interesting, so Veterans Day obviously is always observed in the U.S. on November 11th, and it honors the military veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces. But did you know that it used to be called Armistice Day? And that I had to look up what armistice, I can never say that, but armistice means, and that's an agreement between opposing sides in a war to stop fighting for a certain amount of time, or a truce. Thought that was kind of interesting. I did not know that. So there's your fun fact about Veterans Day today.
Well, I just learned something new, so thank you. We've got
You're
some
very
new
welcome.
knowledge on
You're
the
welcome.
podcast.
Usually you're teaching me things, and today I just taught you something. So there you go.
That's
Why
why we're
don't
a
you
team.
kick us off? Yeah, why don't you kick us off with our Major League Baseball legend, Ted Williams?
All right. Our first athlete / veteran we are going to highlight is the Red Sox legend, Ted Williams. We all know about his remarkable baseball career, the only player to hit over 400, so many other records. But nowadays, you might not realize that a lot of baseball players back in those times lost a lot of years off their careers serving in the military. And Hall of Famer Ted Williams is one of them. He was drafted in 1942 and served in World War II during his career, so we put it on pause. And then after World War II, returned back to the Red Sox to continue his Hall of Fame career. And then 6 years later was called back to active duty in the Korean War. So he did 2 stints with the military during his career, which is it's pretty remarkable to think about that he could take breaks like that, go back and just still hit the ball. It's absolutely remarkable.
Right. Think of the career that this man had. And he took a chunk of his 19-year playing career
Mhm.
off for military service. So think about the numbers and the records. If you think about it from that perspective, we don't want to think about it from that perspective, but truly, like, he's phenomenal
Mhm.
and this amazing player, and yet was missing from the game for a significant amount of time.
And it's not like he was, maybe in an office somewhere serving. I believe he was a pilot. Like he was actually in the action, like in active duty, not just sitting in an office somewhere. So he really put his life on the line.
It's crazy now, and if I remember correctly, when we were kind of doing some research, you told me that he had agreed at the end of World War II that he would stay on the reserves as long as he
Mhm.
wasn't going to be called for active duty. And then he was called for active duty for the Korean War, and no one realized he was a baseball player.
Yeah. So like, they didn't mean to break their agreement, but they drafted him not realizing that he was the Ted Williams, baseball legend. So it was legend has it was more of an accident that they got him back to the Korean War, but he ended up
You,
going
may-
anyways.
Maybe that's a flaw in having a very generic name.
Yeah, there's a lot of Ted Williams out there,
I would
probably
assume
especially
so.
around
If
that
a
time too. Yeah,
Yeah, so interesting. Well, shout out to the Ted Williams out there listening to this.
all of
Williamses
you.
out there listening to this. And thanks to Ted Williams for his service to our country. I want to dive into one that hits home for me, being an Arizona State alum and being a longtime Phoenician. Pat Tillman is the epitome of athlete who is a veteran. For those of you who don't know, Pat Tillman was a football player, a great football player at Arizona State, played for the Arizona Cardinals. And after 9/11, he joined the Army. He was an Army Ranger, as you can imagine. He's just, obviously in great physical shape, but also mental to be a football player, an NFL player, but left his career to go serve and tragically lost his life in action in 2004 from friendly fire. And it's just such a tragic story. His brother also joined the Army as well. And Arizona, Pat Tillman is Phoenix's sort of um, idols, I guess the best word I can use it. They do a Pat Tillman run that raises a ton of money. You end in Sun Devil Stadium. There's a huge statue of Pat Tillman outside the Arizona Cardinals stadium. I believe Tillman's wife, I don't know if she still does, but she started the Pat Tillman Foundation, which has raised a really significant amount of money for great causes. And it's such a sad story, but I mean, this man who walked away from this amazing career to do what he felt was right.
Hmm. And that's served as, pretty incredible inspiration. If you look into it, I believe he's such a humble guy. I don't said he didn't even have a cell phone. He drove like an old beat up truck. I think he signed a pretty massive contract extension and walked away from it to go serve. So it kind of just showed you the values that he had in life. That
Absolutely.
it wasn't about the money. He wanted to play football, and then he realized that his calling was to join the army after 9/11 and
Yeah.
do what was right for the country.
You hear all these stories, right, of all these people who become famous, they get a lot of money. And
Hmm.
I don't want to compare these two at all, obviously, but I just read the Britney Spears documentary, and it's all about how everyone tried to, you know, screw her over for her money, and how evil people can be in the world of sports, and how selfless
Yes,
he was to drop everything and say, "This money doesn't freaking matter." I've
not at
seen
all.
tragedy. I've seen my fellow citizens um, harmed and killed, and so I want to do what's right. And so it's pretty incredible to see what the bravery that he's shown, and may we all be inspired by him to do something above and beyond and outside of our comfort zone, but what we feel is right.
Absolutely not worried about the money aspect.
Right, right, absolutely. Um, Talk to me about we're on football, so let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens
So we'll
and
go.
Alejandro Villanova.
We've got another football player, Alejandro Villanueva, who went to West Point. He served as an Army Ranger captain until 2005. when he left the service and then ended up getting into professional football. And the thing about him is you think about Army Rangers, you think, normal sized human beings. Alejandro is 6'10", so he's
Oh my
just
gosh.
a massive, massive human being. So I'm sure he definitely didn't fit in with most of the other soldiers there. So when he got out, he was such a massive human being that he was able to go play offensive line for the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, for quite a few years. And then, unfortunately left and signed with the rival Baltimore Ravens, but we'll forgive him since he is a veteran and had a few years there. So he had a pretty remarkable football career as an offensive lineman after serving in the Army Rangers.
That's incredible. Well, you look at he and Tillman, both Rangers, right? You have that
Yes,
mentality. I mean, that's not an easy feat, and that's an accomplishment for a career in one leg of a career, right? And you have these
yes.
guys who are Rangers and also NFL players, and the mental capacity and the physical capacity you have to do that. I do want to make a little correction. You said 2005. He was an Army Ranger captain until 2015, at least according to my notes. 2005 was a lot longer ago than we'd like to think.
Yes, it
So it was
was.
2015, in all fairness. So what's he doing now? Is he still playing, or what's he doing now?
So it looks like he's hung up his cleats. He had a pretty solid career. So I think it's time to move on, do something else. I don't know if I don't. You probably didn't watch the Spanish broadcast of the last Super Bowl with the Chiefs and Eagles, but he was the lead analyst on the Spanish
Oh,
broadcast. I think it was
awesome.
Telemundo. So he's giving back to the game in a different way, but he's still making an impact.
What an incredible human. I mean, when you
Yes.
really think about it. Wow. That's aw I mean, now I wanna watch Fox Deportes.
I mean, that broadcast might have been more exciting, to be honest with you.
It's possible, but what does he look like in the broadcast booth? Is it like a Tom Cruise where, allegedly he, like, has the tall leading women in his movies walk on a lower level so he looks the same height? Like, do they have
I'm
to, like,
sure
pull
his
someone's
I'm sure his chair
chair
was
up?
much, much, much lower than everyone else's to
He sits
make
on
him
the
seem a
floor?
normal size. Yes.
Yeah.
So keep your eyes open if you watch Spanish broadcast of NFL
Okay.
football.
Well, you can't miss him apparently, so we'll have to
No,
check that one out this weekend. I'd like to shift us back over to baseball and Jackie Robinson. Before he broke the color barrier in baseball with the Brooklyn Dodgers, he was drafted into the Army for World War II. World War II. Wow, say that 10 times fast. While he never served overseas, he spent time at Fort Hood, Camp Breckenridge in Kentucky, and he served as an athletic coach. I mean, once again, go back to the story of this man who underwent so much scrutiny and really was just such a controversial character in a good way, right? He was the first person to first black person to play Major League Baseball, and that was a really, if you've watched any of the movies, any of the documentaries, was not an easy feat. And here he was, someone who served our country, and yet still went on and played the game that he loved the most.
I mean it's one of the more remarkable stories in the history of sports, right? Like
Hmm.
here's this man that he's known for breaking the color barrier, going through all that sacrifice and everything he had to do to endure all the hatred, and he served his country. He was a veteran on top of that. So I mean, really one of the more impressive athlete slash human being stories of all time.
Yeah, it's a great story. And if for some reason you've never seen the movie about Jackie Robinson, there's multiples, but they're so good. They're so interesting. I think they provide such a great perspective. But I like what a cool story that we didn't know about this one man. Jackie Robinson's number is retired on every single team in baseball, and that's maybe not something you know, but you'll go to a game and you'll see his number on the wall in the outfield, or in their ring of I almost said ring of fire. That's not it. Their Hall of Fame, or their where they honor all of their phenomenal players for each team, and every team has that number retired. And every year Major League Baseball does Jackie Robinson Day. They have Jackie Robinson, I believe it's a foundation that raises money for scholarships, It's a phenomenal way they've continued to keep this man's legacy alive.
And those dedications are the least they can do. Especially, it's very cool
Absolutely.
seeing every player wear number 42 on Jackie Robinson
Hmm.
Day.
It
So
really is. It's super cool. Let's wrap us up with one last person.
we've
Let's
got
talk about Coach K.
Coach K, who legendary college basketball coach. Obviously, he has tremendous values and work ethic and one of the best coaches of all time. But a lot of people don't know that he was in the military. He went to West Point and actually played under other legendary coach Bobby Knight at West Point. So, he was under some strict orders while playing basketball there. And he actually ended up being a field artillery liaison in the infantry in the early 1970s. So you may not look at him and think that he was a military guy, but he's got some deep roots in the military. So that's pretty incredible. And now you see why he was so successful running that program at Duke.
Now, yeah, he's legendary Duke coach. Now they could call him Coach K because his last name is actually pronounced Krzyzewski, which it starts with a K. Very confusing.
Yes.
But he also coached Team USA and is basically the most successful basketball coach in men's college basketball history.
He, I did forget to mention that he also coached basketball at West Point, so he got his start there as well. So his roots are extremely deep in the Army community. And as coach of Team USA, he kind of revived the whole organization after they had a few miserable performances in international basketball. So he really saved Team USA as well. So Duke, Team USA, West Point, he's kind of done it all
He's he's
and
all
been
in.
successful at everything he's done. Yes.
Now, coach, he retired after the 2022 college football season. Do you have any idea what he's up to now?
I'm sure I don't think he's doing anything official. I'm sure he's around Duke in an advisory role. I'm sure they're using him for recruiting and all kinds of things, but
Certainly.
why would you not?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest names and most recognizable faces in college basketball. I mean, why wouldn't you, right?
Mhm.
And if you're not doing that right now, Coach K, we've got a business idea for you.
Get on it.
Get on it. Call up the school, ask them for lots of money. You deserve it.
Yep.
Well, and I know we highlighted obviously 5 athletes here today, but there are so many that we obviously didn't have a chance to highlight. And so we want to say thank you to them and thank you to our veterans who are listening for your service, your families for their sacrifice as well on this Veterans Day podcast edition. Anything you'd like to leave us with, Scott, before we go?
In the spirit of Veterans Day and the Service Academy, I'd just like to give a shout out to the Air Force Academy football team. At the moment of
Mhm.
this podcast recording, they are undefeated. So they're having
Wow.
an absolutely remarkable season. If they stay undefeated, they couldn't, who knows, make the college football playoffs. So just want to give a shout out to them.
That's pretty incredible. Go Air Force. You're apparently the team we should be talking about in Colorado and
Yes,
not the Buffaloes.
they're
Sorry,
the team who's actually
Coach
winning.
Sanders. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, kudos to the Air Force Academy. If you are watching college football, get real excited about that. The Army Navy game always comes up at the very end of this season. It's basically the only game for the last weekend of the college football season, if I'm correct.
The same day as the Heisman, and it's being played in the Foxborough this year in Patriot
Oh,
Stadium. So
cool. Oh,
that'll
that's
be a,
awesome.
that'll be a very cool thing to do.
Well, mom always tells us stories about the Navy. Their mascot is a goat, and since her brother obviously played football for the Navy, she always talks about how stinky the goat was.
It looks
So
stinky.
something to think about.
Yeah,
Looks stinky.
just be happy you're
I
seeing him on
mean,
TV and not next to him.
this is a true statement. You can run a little air freshener for your life. Feel bad for the person who handles the goat.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about obviously that game as we get a little bit closer. But once again, thank you to our veterans for your service and your sacrifice. And if you want anything more on this podcast or the show notes or anything else along those lines, check us out at lastnightsgame.com. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you for your service, everyone.